done for. Everyone get out.
Greetings sailors, and welcome to the first of my preview videos for the upcoming Soviet warships, the destroyer line, and the first one's actually a cruiser, but you know, whatever. And this is just going to be a relatively brief video where I give an overview of the line, a kind of a look and feel video. And if you want to know the detailed stats, what I've done is I've compiled a spreadsheet which compares tier for tier these destroyers with the other destroyers in the game, including the upcoming Polish premium, whose name I'm not even going to try and pronounce. But yeah, that looks like a fairly interesting ship as well. So, what are these? What is their flavour? Well, that's what Wargaming likes to do when they put in one of these lines. They like to, as possible, try and give them a unified feel, and sometimes they can manage it and sometimes they can't. But in this case, it kind of does. But like I've said, it is different tier for tier. There's kind of groups. So their stated purpose was to create shotgun destroyers. I actually saw a quote from Storm that pretty much used that exact phrase. And that is most true, I feel, at the low tiers. Now, it's not unique in that regard. These aren't unique in that regard because the American destroyers also have really short-range torpedoes. And in some ways, they are better short-range torpedoes, at least towards the higher tiers. But at the lower tiers, I actually think these are going to be... I mean, it's a pretty specialised playstyle. They are basically ambush boats. 3-kilometre torpedoes is nothing, but 3 kilometres you can't really miss. And with tier 2, it's not so bad. It's actually pretty fast. It's got 35 knots. It's the fastest of the tier 2s. And that kind of helps when you're trying to get close enough. But I found with the tier 2 and the tier 3, you really only want to try and close with battleships. These are battleship hunters. You don't really want to tangle with the low tier cruisers if you can possibly help it, because they will just murder you. The tier 3 is, well, you go from being able to launch 6 torpedoes out of 2 launchers to launching 10 torpedoes out of 5 launchers. And this is by far the most kind of ridiculous machine, I think, of all of them tier per tier. It's the slowest of all the Soviet destroyers, although it's not the slowest destroyer generally. Actually, the tier 2 American, the Samson, is pretty damn slow. But it is still at 32 knots, you know, that's kind of cruiser speeds at tier 3 are easily matching that. So it's not especially fast, but if you can sneak up on a battleship, the ability to put out over 60,000 points worth of damage with a 22-second reload is ridiculous. I consider the torpedo armament on this to be the main armament, because the guns at tier 2 and 3 are terrible. It's a 40-second turret turn time. You don't really get many of them either. So although they have the best range for their tier of any of the low tier destroyers, the guns are almost unusable, because 40 seconds is that's battleship turret turn times. That's actually worse than the turret turn times of the same tier Japanese destroyers, and they're known for having terrible turret turn times. I'm having to say turret turn times a lot here. The rate of fire is, however, a lot better than the Japanese, so you can whip the shots out fairly quickly if you can get the guns on target, but that is a big if. So pretty much all about the torpedoes. Tier 4 I consider to be, frankly, pretty bad. This one actually is... Did I say the tier 3 was the slowest of the Russians? I take it back. It's not. This is. Barely 32 knots, and it's still faster than the Samson's 30 at tier 2, but it's pretty much outpaced by everything else at its own tier. In fact, it definitely is. And it is, you know, it's got 5-kilometre torpedoes, which is a big step up from 3, but that's still worse than the Clemson. They do less damage than the Clemson, although they reload faster. Although, I mean, tier for tier, looking at the spreadsheet, it's clear that the Japanese are the king of torpedoes. Absolutely. And the Americans are the king of the guns. And so you might be wondering, what's the point of these? Well, this one, frankly, is not very good, but once you get to these mid-tiers, I mean, I'm not going to talk about this one too much more, actually. It's just not particularly good. I mean, the gun range is okay, but the turret turn time is still 40 seconds. The reload is actually better than the Clemson, I think. But again, good luck getting those guns turned on anybody. and it has I mean, the camo rating's not bad, it's actually slightly better than the Clemson, but this is the last tier where actually you have better camo than any other destroyer, because from tier 5 upwards, the camo from tier 5 to tier 10 is the worst tier per tier. And from tier 5 to tier 7, it's only slightly behind the Americans, but the gap widens considerably from tier 8 to tier 10. So they're not stealthy at all. They're not destroyer hunters like the Americans can be. You will get outspotted by everything from tier 5 to tier 10, and that is a significant problem. So that also makes the low tier strategy of ambushing people with a lot of torpedoes at once significantly harder, because you're never going to know when a torpedo, another destroyer is nearby, rather, and it makes sneaking up to ambush positions considerably harder. You're going to have a very hard time using that particular playstyle. So I would say from tier 5 upwards it becomes more about the guns, but still the tier 5's not particularly great in that regard. Now the gun stats are actually largely like the Gremiashi. It's in terms of its overall stats, it's slightly faster than the Gremiashi, but it turns worse, and I think it's a significant enough it's worse enough that it is definitely the inferior mover, even though it's slightly faster. But the big difference between this and the Gremiashi is that you go from 5 kilometer torpedoes on the tier 4 to 4 kilometer torpedoes on the tier 5, and of course the Gremiashi has got 8 kilometers. Now, gun-wise, as I've said, it's largely the same, 36-second turret turn time, which you can make better with captain skills. It's got, I think, the same camo rating, but it's also got the same gun range. So you've got, where are we, a camo rating of, if I look at my spreadsheet, 7 kilometers and a gun firing range of almost 12 kilometers. So this is where it gets much more about the kind of the other playstyle of this line. Like, even though the stated playstyle is shotgun destroyers, it's not. It's invisible firing destroyers. That's what these truly are, and that starts to become apparent at tier 5. Now it's even more so from tier 8 upwards, because you can then mount equipment that improves things further, and by the time you get to the higher tiers you're going to have more of the relevant captain skills as well. But this is where it starts to become the flavour, rather than this talk of short-range torpedoes. Because tier for tier, up till about tier 7, honestly, the Americans are not that far ahead in terms of their torpedoes, but they have significantly better guns. So these are not destroyers that you want to get close to other ships in particular. These are destroyers where you want to keep at the limit of your own range as much as possible, and to play around with detection ranges as much as possible. But it's harder because your camo values are worse, mostly tier for tier, but still at tier 5 it's only a little worse than the Americans. The tier 6, again, it's a little bit better. I mean, the biggest improvement over the tier 5 is that you halve your turret turn speed, which makes a significant difference. It's still the 4 kilometer torps, but they basically improve in both speed and damage over tier 5. So you've gone from 65 knot torps to 70 knot torps that do 15k damage each, and 2 center-mounted torpedo launchers, and center-mounted torpedo launchers are a feature of most of these ships. Make this, I mean, it's okay, but you're not going to get to use those torpedoes very often. Like, that is, once you get to tier 6, people are playing better. The ability to sneak up on people playing badly is, it starts to be much reduced, and you're going to have to just start using the guns, basically. It's going to become all about the guns, trying to stay in stealth and using the guns. But you've jumped almost a kilometer in detection range. You've gone from 7 to 7.7 kilometers from tier 5 to tier 6. So it gets a bit harder because your guns haven't improved in range. So I would say actually the tier 6 is probably, although you've considerably improved your turret traverse, it's going to be easier to be spotted. But of course, camo paint is going to improve the stats on all these ships, and you should be using camo paint on your destroyers anyway. The reason it's not on any of these is I needed to strip it off in order to look at the base stats so I could do this comparison spreadsheet. Tier 7, I think, is where it gets a little bit better, but not really much better, because, again, your detection range goes up to 8.1 kilometers, a little bit worse than the Mahan at 7.9. Your gun range is 12.3, and it's not a big improvement over tier 5, but it is an improvement, and it's still the best by over half a kilometre over the Mahan. But the Mahan has obviously got the better turn, and it's got better reload, and it's got more guns. So, yeah. Although actually with Mahan, it depends what hull you're using in terms of more guns. Well, actually, no, I don't think it does have more guns. I think the Kiev has more guns. I'm just looking at my spreadsheet now. Yes, you can either have the Mahan hull 5x1 or 4x1, or you can have this with 3x2 turrets. So actually, no, this has got more guns. Okay, 6 versus 5 at most. So yeah, this is the tier, I think, where you really do transition to the fully to the gun gameplay, and that, if nothing else, because you pick up an extra couple of knots. Now the tier 6 is it's kind of, it's not even the fastest out of the regular ones, and actually the fastest tier 6 of a destroyer is the Polish premium that's coming in, which is going to have 39.4 knots versus 37.3. So the reason why, although the gun range doesn't really step up and your camo gets worse from tier 6 to tier 7, the reason why the jump from tier 6 to tier 7 feels like this is where the guns start to properly work is because you pick up that speed that you need. It's 42.9 knots. This is a very fast boat. A very fast boat indeed. Easily the fastest of its tier, and actually the second fastest of the entire line. Now it's only just ahead of the tier 8, and it's not that far behind the tier 10, but yeah, this is kind of the flavour of the high tiers, is very fast boats. And that's why this firing at range thing is going to work, even with the worst camo, because you can easily stay ahead of your enemies, and you can run away when you need to, and you can much better keep your guns on target with that drastically improved turret turn time, although it's still worse than the Americans tier for tier, of course, but it's better at least at this point than the Japanese, because I think the tier 4, which absolutely is the stinker of the line, you actually have a worse turret traverse than the Isukaze, even if you've got a better rate of fire. Tier 8, the Tashkent, a little bit slower, but only a little bit. It's like literally 0.1 knots slower. And the turret, the torpedo launcher layout changes a bit actually. In tier 7 you've got these dual quintuple launchers, which have a slightly unusual layout. It's 2 on top and 3 on the bottom. The tier 8's a little bit more conventional with 3x3 launchers. This is the first tier where you actually start to get range on your torps. You go from 4 kilometers to 8 kilometers, and the nature of the torpedo changes. They're still, you know, fairly high damage. They're about equivalent to the Benson's torpedoes, although actually no, they are pretty equivalent to the Benson torpedoes. They've got a better reload. They have a slightly worse range, 8.2 kilometers on the Benson and 8 on this. This has got, I think, 100 less damage, 55 knot speed, and 70-second reload. So this is a superior torpedo boat to the Benson, arguably, just on the reload alone. Although the Benson can get out one more torpedo in its spread. But the Benson, tier for tier, at tier 8, that I think still has by far the best guns, because that has quite a ridiculous, and it's like the tier 7, you can have a 5x1 or a 4x1 setup with the turrets depending on what hull you pick, but it's got a 5.3 second turret turn time, and it's actually got an equal range in that it has 11.6 kilometers, the same as this, the Tashkent. So at tier 8 it kind of flatlines a bit in terms of being good at firing from stealth, because you have over a kilometer extra detection range over the Benson. The Benson is definitely the better gunboat at tier 8. So this one's a little bit, it's not great. I mean, it can still do it, but it's definitely not the best at it at its tier. Tier 9, again, we're getting back to these quintuple mounts, and actually this is the most interesting layout, because you've got 1 center line and 2 side mounts. So you can put out 10 from one side, turn the boat, put out 5 from another side, and that's a pretty powerful ability, but they're only 15k damage a torp, which is by far the worst, and they're still only 8 kilometer torpedoes as well, and you're not even going to be able to fire these from stealth, at least with the base ranges. You might be able to just about do it with the relevant camo skills on the captain and camo paint. And you can also, I think this is the first tier where you can buy concealment system. So if you stick on concealment system, and we'll actually just do that now, and we'll stick on the camo paint, and we will go from 8.3 kilometers to 7.2. So that is worth doing. So this is the first tier where, with appropriate upgrades, and the concealment system is an expensive one, it's 2 million credits, and the camo paint on your boat, you can fire your torpedoes from stealth for the first time of the entire line. And I think that's actually true of the Americans as well. But it does make a bit of a change, but they're still, I mean, again, a quicker reload than actually no, not quicker reload than the Americans. A quicker reload than the Japanese. I mean, the Japanese have got 20-kilometer torpedoes at tier 9. It's ridiculous compared to 8. So they're still kind of, you know, tier for tier shotgun range, but you can, at least in theory, fire these from stealth with all the relevant things. And I think you even get a captain's skill that increases. Oh, is that even the right captain? I don't know. I swear there's one at the higher tiers which increases your camo skill. There's certainly one that increases your gun range, and that's going to be an important one because extra gun range increases your ability to fire from stealth. So that's going to be super useful. So it's going to take the right combination of equipment and captain skills to make these boats work as stealth gunships. But it's from tier 8 really where you can do that most because of the ability to get equipment. So yeah, it gets better with the torpedoes. It's actually the slowest of the high tiers. It's 40.4 knots, but that's true of the other tier 9s as well. They're actually slower than the tier that comes previous to it. But it's still 40.4 knots is still pretty fast. You know, that's no slouch. That's easily better than I think the fastest of any other nation per tier. I think the next fastest is something like the Shimakaze with 39.4. So although 40.4 is, you know, the worst of the high tiers, it's still pretty damn fast. Then we have the tier 10, and this is the one everyone's going to be interested in. Is it worth it? I think so. It's a pretty nippy boat. It's got 43.4 knots, by far the fastest ship in the game, I think. Camo value is 9 kilometers base compared to 7.6 for both the other tier 10s. It also has a slower rate of fire by far than the gearing, but better range, 13-kilometer gun range. You can increase the gun range with equipment. You can decrease your spottability with equipment. So this is going to be the ultimate firing from stealth boat, I think, far more so than the gearing, which, although it's got better concealment, it just has a more limited gun range as well. The turret turn time, I mean, it's finally nearly on a par with the Americans. It's 9 seconds versus 7.2 on the gearing. The torpedoes are somewhat interesting on this in that you get a choice between 10-kilometer torpedoes and 6-kilometer torpedoes. It's back to 2 center-mounted quintuple launchers, so you're actually going to be able to put out less than the tier 9, but at a better range. The 6-kilometer torpedoes, I mean, the 10-kilometer torpedoes are, again, 15.1k damage, 56 knots. They're actually slower than on the tier 9. They're pretty slow torpedoes compared to the 67 and 66 knots of the gearing and the Shimakaze. But it's the other ones that are kind of interesting, that you get nearly 20,000 damage, which is actually almost what the Shimakaze's base torpedoes have. I mean, the Shimakaze has a choice of 23, nearly 24k damage torpedoes, but they have a 15-kilometer range. Well, this has got 6-kilometer range for nearly 20k damage, so it's worse than the stock torpedoes on the Shimakaze by far. But if you can get close enough to unleash a barrage of 10 of these, then yeah, it's going to be pretty damaging. But I suspect most people will be using the 10-click torps. So, yeah, at the higher tiers, it's all about the stealth firing. The shotgun destroyer thing really only holds true at the mid tiers. The tier 4 is pretty terrible. The tier 5 and 6, I honestly don't think are great. The Gremiashi is a better regular tier 5 than the Gnevny, to be honest. And it's only really tier 7 that you start to pick up this, to really pick up this gunboat style. But I would absolutely say do not ever go hunting other destroyers if you can help it, because they will outspot you, even with upgraded stealth capability. You know, everyone else is going to be running around with those upgraded stealth capabilities as well. You're always going to get outspotted from tier 5 upwards. So these are not destroyer hunters. They're just not. You've got to use them for other purposes. So we'll have some gameplay after this, and I will break that up tier per tier. But yeah, I think the tier 10 is probably going to be worth it. I don't know what the grind is like. I got this account with basically everything fully unlocked, so it might be that it's a horrible grind to get there. It might be it's more XP than the other lines. It might be it's more expensive than the other lines. I don't know. I don't know all that. This is all very, you know, this is just a preview. I've basically played a couple of battles in each so far, because that's all I've got time for with this account. So, yeah. So, there will be a gameplay video to follow today, hopefully. I will put the link for the detailed description, the detailed spreadsheet with the comparison of the stats in the description, is what I meant to say. And I hope you found this informative, and if you did, you can leave any comments, you can hit the like button, you can subscribe to my channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.